And we're live. You're tuning to the Cosmic Children podcast. I'm your host, Kevin. And today I have a very interesting individual in the studio with me. I find it hard to pin down what this individual does because he seems to be doing quite a bit. So if you could please introduce yourself, John.
Thanks for the intro. My name is Jonathan Liu. I am a visual artist who works with photography, so mostly kind of traditional processes, working with darkroom and experimental techniques. I am a founding member of NFT Asia. I think you've had NFT Asia on in a previous episode talking about the community and how we work with artists who mint their works as NFTs. I am also a lecturer at LaSalle College of the Arts. So I teach in the design faculty for diploma students, where I teach photography and kind of like arts foundational classes like ideation and things like that.
That is an amazing introduction. So to kickstart the conversation, I would like to get your definition of what NFTs are and what they mean to you.
I think NFTs, technically they are tokens that, point to something physical or digital. And in my case and how I use NFTs, I mint my photography works as NFTs. They can be prints that I've made. They can be digital photographs. I think the idea of what NFTs can do for me as an artist, it lies purely in creating this alternative opportunity for us to commodify our artworks as artists, right? And during COVID, I think that was quite important, especially when jobs are drying up. There were no museums, no galleries, so you can't have exhibitions. There's no book fair, so you can't make books. And NFTs kind of presented itself as a viable opportunity to make a living through your art. Like you don't have to, go take on a job just in the meantime. You could try to market yourself as an NFT artist. And I think that's ideally what it meant for me at that time. At least until, NFT Asia was formed and we started to see a lot more development with, what NFTs could do in terms of, generative algorithmic art, for example, what NFTs can do outside of art, logistics, administrative things, archive on the blockchain, for example. So I think NFTs as a technology can change a lot of, can disrupt and change a lot of how we see things, how we use things, how we sell things. And it's definitely not a money grabbing, cash grabbing kind of technology, although for some people they can, if you kind of like trade collectibles and things like that. But I think the underlying technology has a lot of potential for not just for artists, but for kind of society to leverage in a way where it can benefit us. Yeah.
Speaking to the formation of NFT Asia, could you elaborate what were the founding, the initial ideas that you guys got together to form NFT Asia? What were you observing? What did you see in the space that was lacking?
I think for me personally, kind of talking about historically how photography has been positioned in the fine art market, right? If you go back a couple hundred years when photography was, invented in the 1800s, people tried to experiment with photography to make artworks. And for them, photography wasn't really art because it's a representation of reality. And, that idea hung on for, a good couple centuries, decades. And it was only recently that photography is kind of seen as an art form. You can use photography to talk about narratives, fiction or non-fiction, as much as paintings, as much as sculptures. And I think from what I've observed was that a lot of artists, a lot of creators who create these, you know, let's say 3D models or animation or spatial spatial atmospheres and illustrations and, you know, these beautiful, wonderful creations, they were being left out of, you know, what contemporary art can be. And as an Asian artist, there was also this gap in representing our work and, you know, what we create on the mainstream platforms. So there were a lot of kind of Western-centric artworks being talked about, especially with NFTs, because, you know, it was predominantly kind of hyped up, you know, over there. And, you know, we did see this gap that we wanted to fill because we know we have talented artists and they may not be, you know, inclined to, you know, marketing themselves in English, as well as, you know, everyone else can. And also weirdly, NFTs were being peddled on Clubhouse back then and Twitter Spaces. So it was kind of like selling something visual, but through talking about it.
Yep.
So that presents itself as this big barrier for a lot of artists. And so the idea, for at least for me, is, you know, kind of giving space and creating opportunities, creating this community for people to talk about these ideas, to learn from each other. And I think when you had Clara and Ernest on, they spoke about similar kind of thoughts about why this was important. You know, it's about this collaborative effort to learn together, to build things, to talk about ethical approaches to, you know, creating artwork on the blockchain, for example. Yeah.
I'm curious to know, who introduced you to NFTs, or how did you find out about it? Because it's before the influx of people knowing about it with regards to the auctions and the sales. I'm curious to know how you discovered it.
I think I was, it started with crypto. I think like most other people, I bought some Bitcoin and Ethereum in 2017 at the peak. You know, like I read the news and be like, oh, this is the new money. Okay, I'll try. You can't really buy anything with it, but there's some cafes. So I was studying in London at a point of time, and there were some cafes accepting Bitcoin for coffee. So I was like, okay, I'll buy $50 of each. And then the price went like 90% down after. And
thought you about money.
Yeah.
Inflation.
Yeah. So, you know, like I couldn't even buy a coffee anymore. The $50 is like, I don't know, $5. So I just kind of left it there, you know, on one of these exchanges, and didn't really follow up with it, and kind of only heard about NFTs on the news a bit 2019. And then I think it was 2020 where it actually blew up, you know, like a lot more artists are coming into the space. There were a lot more headline grabbing sales in the space. And I think this was all before the big Beeple sale, right? That just sent like all the headlines, you know, parabolic. But it was around that time during COVID where, you know, artists were minting their works as NFTs that I kind of like, oh, wait, I have some Ethereum. Maybe I'm an artist. Maybe I can look at what's going on, and started Googling and basically experimented with one of the NFT platforms called Rarible. It was, I think OpenSea was there, but I thought Rarible's UI was a bit cooler, less Wikipedia-ish. And I created this fake pseudonym called the Royal College of Art. And I started, you know,
pretentious.
Very pretentious. And then like, you know, started minting things to experiment, you know, like how the process would be. And like burnt a couple $100 in gas, because that's the only way you learn at that point of time. There weren't any YouTube videos telling you about the dangers of what gas is, and things like that. So there was a couple of months before I met you know, Clara and Siobhan and the others, that other co-founders of NFT Asia. It was just through kind of curiosity of, you know, how I could use this medium, and also the dust in my old wallet and see if I could do anything creative with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
What about the space excites you? Because I think back when I was speaking to Clara and Ernest, I think they were saying that the idea of the term NFT artist isn't exactly true because the NFT technology is just a medium at which you present your work, you distribute your work and stuff like that. So I'm curious to know what about the space excites you or is still exciting to you?
I think it's definitely looking at new technologies being built and, ideated on the blockchain. I think something interesting that's happening with kind of experiments about decentralized autonomous organizations, for example, DAOs, that can change the way we look at democracy or voting or kind of making decisions in a linear format rather than a hierarchical format. What else excites me? Experiments with the technology itself, being able to see kind of algorithmic artists generating artwork and, making sales from it, looking at how some of these artworks are made. Very big fan of Refik Anadol's artworks. He's a Turkish artist who works with kind of generative artworks, like huge, large-scale generative artworks. And yeah, it's just seeing all these new things that are being created and experimented in the space that kind of, quote unquote, traditional art isn't as exciting anymore compared to it. And also, the general kind of creativity and community-centric projects. I'm not talking about collectibles, but, I'm talking about where people are coming together, forming kind of collectives on, how can we change what photography arts can be? How can we, see more kind of illustrators on the mainstream art markets and things like that. So I think these things excite me. They still excite me, even if the market is in a bit of a lull at the point of time, because I don't think there ever was that much money in art NFTs. There definitely were a lot more money in collectibles.
Is there a difference?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, comparing Rothko to a Charizard Pokemon card. So if you kind of see the use case of each of them, one is kind of gachapon. It's luck based. It's almost gambling. You are paying money to get something rare, and if you get something rare, it's worth X amount of money to someone, and you flip and you sell, and it's kind of like eBay.
Fair,
right? Yep. You dig in a thrift store and you find something and you sell it for a higher price.
Yep.
Flipping.
Yep.
And for arts, it's presenting this alternative economy. Because you would need gallery representation, or you would need to know people in markets that can, help you peddle your artworks or validate you as an artist in order for you to sell. But if you're able to market yourself well in the NFT space, you can make a name for yourself. You can, start to sell and engage directly to your collectors. And I see that working out really well for a lot of artists in the space. And yeah, I think it's definitely paradigm shifting.
Yep.
In a sense of expanding what our options are.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that, because to echo what you said earlier about an alternate means of, I think, showcasing our work, and you mentioned that you were teaching in LaSalle as well. Do you imagine that perhaps students right now starting like photography and illustration, this is something that they need to be aware of and they need to learn and integrate, as important as like a portfolio? Because back when I was in school, people were saying, the website portfolio is the most important thing, because people go to a website, you can see what you've done. But coincidentally at that time, Instagram was getting popular, and Instagram kind of became someone's portfolio because you can curate your works on that. People can see it as a lot more accessible. Do you think, with regards to how NFT technology has been distributing and showcasing and gathering people of different communities together, do you imagine it will be important for, or it will be detrimental to one's career if they are not cognizant and aware of it?
I think that's a great question because there definitely is a lot of interest from students with NFTs. And I think a lot of it comes with the headlines, right? Like, making $1 million with like some new collection. I can do that too. Maybe I can try and be rich. But I think in terms of the underlying technology, the barrier of understanding what NFTs are, what they can do, ideologically is still quite high. A lot of the students may not understand the difference it possesses comparing itself to, let's say, traditional markets. And in order for them to kind of understand what this technology potentially can be, they need to understand what negatives there are associated to it as well. So I would assume a lot of students would be worried about, let's say the sustainability issues with kind of proof of work, blockchains, but may not understand that there is that implication with that. So I think education in that sense, of what blockchains are, what smart contracts are, what different blockchains do, I think that is important to know. And if you are a student, diploma or degree student, and you kind of jump into that rabbit hole of, researching what these things are, I think it can be beneficial, but I would also be a bit cautious as a lecturer to kind of push them towards it because they can lose money. And I think a lot of artists who, are not as researched into the space will lose money. And it's usually from gas fees. If you're on Ethereum, for example, to create a piece of, I think earlier I was talking about losing gas fees when I was trying things out. If you're on the wrong platform that you may not be able to sell your works, you basically have to spend money in order to have the opportunity to sell. And if you don't sell, then that's sunk costs. For a lot of artists who may not sell, they will end up spending, X amount of money on gas. It will be there on the blockchain forever, but it will be unsold. And I think that can be quite risky depending on how much works they put on the blockchain, or what they are comfortable with in terms of spending to experiment with this technology. But to the question of if it is important for their careers, I definitely think contextual knowledge of what NFTs are can be beneficial. I've seen that in some projects, people talking about the metaverse and people using kind of like, blockchain collectible projects as a way to build community around a brand, right? Like as a way to bring people together. Like those are all great ideas in terms of, engaging the new age audiences and buyers potentially for a brand. So yeah, there are pros and cons, and as long as they understand what they're getting into, and are cautious with their security, like with wallets and kind of scams being quite prevalent in the space, I think it's definitely something that they should go into. Yeah.
Do you think that there's a lot of misinformation in the space, and why do you think there is?
Because people are just churning views and clicks, and they may not know or have spent a lot of time kind of researching into something, but they kind of transition into this role where they are now giving tutorials. And I think and I'm not saying that, me or anyone specifically are, the source for good, balanced perspectives on kind of educating people on the blockchain. But because there are so many views and so many kind of videos on YouTube, for example, or TikTok, you don't really know what is accurate. And I think that's where the DYOR mantra in the space comes from.
What is DYOR?
Do your own research. Like, don't trust anyone. If someone's telling you like, oh yeah, buy Luna, it's the next best thing. Like,
we say we're not going to talk about that.
yeah, we did say we're not going to talk about that. But, there were a lot of these people telling you Luna was going to, change the world or whatever. And they are, either they might truly believe that it is, it was great technology, or they are leveraged in Luna, and if you buy into it, they make money, right? So there's a lot of these aspects with crypto that kind of form criticisms for it that are rightly kind of deserving. The greater fool theory and things like that. So misinformation is definitely tough to police. You just have to, be wary and double check before you kind of jump into anything. Especially in the crypto space that moves really, really fast. And yeah, DYOR, definitely.
What has helped you find, not the right information, but some sort of stability in the space? You mentioned that it moves very fast. You mentioned that there is quite a huge gap of, let's say, information and knowledge initially. But what has helped you, I guess, stay grounded and not be like swept away by FOMO or anything like that?
I mean, not to say that I've never succumbed to FOMO for anything. But, being in the space for the last, I would say, a year and a half, 2 years, actively, like almost full time, you kind of see the pattern of how things operate. Where there's new technology, people would, market it a certain way, saying like, oh, that's the Ethereum killer. It's going to be, one thing or the other. And then when you look into the specifics, when you understand how everything works, you kind of see through the bullshit. And that can only come with, studying and being in a space or speaking to people who have been in the space far longer. And I think that's where a community like NFT Asia could be beneficial, because you are surrounded by people that don't want anything from you in that sense. They're all artists. They are all in the space, but they have also been in the space for quite some time. And when, you see some new project or you have some ideas and be like, oh, maybe I should mint my work on this new platform, someone's going to come and be like, why are you going to a new platform? It's kind of like, putting your work in a shop where there's no one walking by, compared to, let's say, other more well-established platforms. So they give you kind of advice based on what you're talking about, and you can kind of learn through that over time, right? But you definitely have to make mistakes to, learn about these technicalities. It's just, a part of, existing in the crypto space. Like everyone have been scammed at least once. Just,
it's like a badge of honor, and you continue doing it. And
yeah, like, you've been on a protocol that have been hacked. Check.
You've been rugged?
You've been rugged. Check. If you bought a stupid fake thing on OpenSea, check. Not that we should glorify these things, but we have to be able to tell the difference. And it's such a complex space where people kind of use language that you may not understand to kind of obfuscate what they're trying to accomplish. And it's easy to fall for charismatic people with, different blockchains or different kind of KOLs in the space, right? So always trust yourself and your own research. And yeah, it's tough to avoid, but it's easy to just spend some time. Don't FOMO, research into things. Yeah, like I mean, if it's gonna move that much upwards in a short amount of time, it will drop that much in a short amount of time. So, yeah.
So despite the criticisms levied at the space, NFT space in general, and despite all these, I guess, news articles about scams and rug pulls and people just running away with the money, why do you still believe in it? Or why do you still believe in the technology?
I think I still believe in it because I see it as a viable alternative, as opposed to, what are the other possibilities? Let's say to sell art. Like you can have, as many kind of art book fairs in a year. You can have, web shops and things, and you can have Instagram marketing. But, some of these things will eventually, shift to something else. People will lose their attention onto your kind of web stores and platforms and things like that. Instagram is now no longer that popular anymore as it was back then. So if you were fully leveraged in one thing, it could backfire, right? And it should be the same with NFTs. You have to look at what's happening with the space. But I believe in it because of what I've seen. I think like the change that it has brought to some artists, especially artists on NFT Asia, who have made opportunities that they can never dream of, right? And yeah, I'm not saying that it is the future. I'm not saying that it will be how everything will function, but I do see a future where NFTs would be kind of invisible. It's a back end thing.
Okay.
Right? Like in the future when you're buying something or you're transferring money on PayNow or whatever, it uses blockchain technology, but it's not going to be like NFT art or NFT money or NFT products. It's just a way to kind of capture interest in a particular technology as it's, in this nascent stage. And I think there was this statistic like in 2008 or something, or 1998.
1998, wow.
Emails, like 96% of emails were spam. So if we stopped believing in emails back then, how would the future happen? Because there were 96% of spam and scams from Nigerian princes, on emails. Did we lose faith in the technology of, basically what is, foundational to our productivity in the current times? So I see the same thing with NFTs, like
there be a maturation thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's still quite young. It's a couple of years old with NFTs, and people, opportunists, terrible people want to, exploit that lack of knowledge and lack of education and understanding of the space. And they want to scam unknowing people. That will happen. That has happened with other technologies. It will happen with this. There's no way we can kind of prevent assholes from existing. But what we can do is educate ourselves more, right? Like you see that with kind of old people and iBanking.
Yeah.
The government does a lot of education in, how to tell what are spam or what are scams and scammers in the space. And I think we can do the same for NFTs as well.
It's interesting you mentioned emails and iBanking scams because people are still getting scammed over phone.
Yeah.
Phone lines. Yeah.
I mean, I had 2 missed calls from hello, this is the Ministry of Health, today. Like that happens every week. And it's just one of those things that comes with technology. If we want to be accessible to everybody, that means other people will be accessible to us. And unless we, go into this hermit lifestyle, we will always be prone to these terrible people trying to scam us.
We'll be open to some vectors of attack in one way or another.
Yeah. But if you understand, Ministry of Health wouldn't use an automated voicemail thing, then you would understand that's a scam. And then you just kind of put it down and, move on. Yeah.
So we can only hope to see the maturation of the technology as it implements into the various facets that we engage in. Because you mentioned about PayNow and PayLah, we only see the front end user interface, but we don't see the back end, and we don't see how the payment rails are and how money is transferred and everything. So do you imagine it to be something like that? It would just integrate the blockchain technology, and we won't even notice it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from a technological standpoint, I'm not saying I know a lot of how PayNow works or PayLah works, but it feels like a layer 2 blockchain kind of thing, right? Like PayNow money is not actually moving from bank account to bank account, but it's a ledger.
It's a ledger, yeah.
And that's what blockchain is. And at the end of the week, for example, all these transactions are then kind of packaged up and settled on the actual accounts. And that's basically what layer 2 blockchains do, like Polygon for ETH or kind of Arbitrum for ETH and things like that. So I see kind of, similarities in how we already use it. But one thing that's good about it would be we have a little bit more autonomy with kind of blockchain technologies and blockchains in general than a centralized kind of platform of money.
Yep.
And I think this is where, kind of like talking about CBDCs, like central bank digital currencies, where, if Singapore had a government issued stable coin, they can basically track all of your spending, what you're buying.
It's all in this big ledger, right?
Yeah. And they own your, privacy data. They know what you're buying and at what frequency. And they will probably say it's to prevent terrorism, just for our own good. But I think I would like to kind of retain a little bit of that privacy as much as possible. And I see blockchain technology kind of giving that to us in that sense.
So you wouldn't buy into the PAP coin?
PAP coin would be quite epic. I would buy into the East Side coin.
Okay.
If there were one.
Fair enough.
I could see an East Side and West Side coin, and then it'll be like Doge and Shiba kind of. Yeah, make it a meme coin.
So it's interesting to touch about CBDC and I guess how centralized authorities might use the technology for more quote unquote nefarious means and intrude on the well-being of citizens. So I'm curious to know, because my view of cryptocurrencies in general, it always has a very strong philosophical bent to it. There's always some, Bitcoin started out, I think, post-financial crisis, and it is to sidetrack completely the financial system. I'm curious to know, are there any beliefs in this cryptocurrency NFT space that you disagree with? That you feel it shouldn't be like that, it should be something else?
Oh, that's a big question, because there's a lot of facets to, blockchain, cryptocurrencies and things like that. I think I might need more time to kind of process this, but off the top of my head, I am wary of the gambling side of things with kind of crypto and NFTs in general, where it seems too easy to kind of trade and flip and things, and it could get quite addictive, because like there's this thing we talk about, like, magic internet money, right? Like when you spend one ETH, it feels like one ETH, but it's actually $2,000. But when it's one ETH, it doesn't feel as impactful. Something of
the brain doesn't really cognitively say, that is actually 2,000, right?
Yeah. Like, when you look at what I think the peak of, so if you take a collectible, for example, Bored Ape Yacht Club or whatever, the peak of that project was 150 ETH.
So how much is that in
that's like a HDB flat.
Jesus.
Like, it doesn't matter how much it is, but 150 sounds okay. But you can buy a house with it. And I think that applies to a lot of other kind of tokens, and when certain tokens, their denomination gets too big, they usually kind of do a burn and to bring it back down to like, it's no longer $10 a token, it's now 50 cents a token. We've burnt like 80% of the supply or whatever. Because when it's cheap, people will be like, oh, I wouldn't buy a Bitcoin for, how much is Bitcoin today? 30,000 US. But, oh, Dogecoin is like 6 cents. I'll buy 1 million and then,
Or throw 50 in or 100 in. Yeah,
$100 and you can get a couple hundred Dogecoin because, oh, maybe Dogecoin will become like 30,000 one day. But people tend to forget that they have different supplies for each of the tokens, and there's only ever, like, if I'm not wrong, 21 million Bitcoin, but there probably are billions of Dogecoin now.
Yep.
So you see that disparity, and
that's where the economy, the knowledge of the economy of both different things come in, right?
Yeah. Because otherwise you're just kind of buying into something thinking that it will go somewhere. And I feel like that encourages a gambling tendency within crypto that can be quite toxic. And not even just crypto, but like the other day I was in the theater and there was this like ad before what did I watch? Doctor Strange, I think. And there was this Scythe trade ad. And it was like these two guys saying like, hey, I'm gonna buy apples, man. Like, how much you gonna buy? And then the guy's like $50. And then this like, oh, I'm gonna all in on apples. And I think this obsession with making a profit can be quite detrimental if you don't understand fully what you're in, because it's so easy. And I think one thing good about crypto and NFTs is that you don't have to be a millionaire to invest. That's the issue with what the banking or financial systems were. It's difficult for you to invest. You need to get a banker, someone that works at a bank to buy into an ETF or whatever, index fund, and put X amount of money and get dividends and things like that. But the deals that you can get is different based on your net worth, right? Because of risk tolerance. But for crypto, you will be open to all sorts of these kind of investment instruments, and one really have to you really have to kind of understand what you're buying into, and this applies to like Anchor Protocol, right? 20% APY. Like,
it's a bit too good to be true.
When it's too good to be true, it's probably they are losing money to get you to go on it, right? And then you become a statistic, and then things happen. And I think it's not something I dislike in terms of having access to these financial instruments or alternative ways to invest. But it's definitely scary and dangerous for people who might not understand it fully, about diversifying risks and things like that. And I think for other aspects of kind of NFTs and crypto, there's toxic positivity and there's toxic negativity. So
could you please elaborate?
Like when certain people make mistakes in the space and people are like, oh, everyone's just learning. Like, we're just building the space. We're learning as it goes. But no, that was a mistake. You have messed up people's lives. And you need to know that it's not a free fall just because you're anonymous and you can just experiment in the space. And some people might gather together and be like, I mean, this space is so small, we should just, learn from each mistake. And, but I feel like people should have, should hold people accountable when they make mistakes and when they do things in a way where it can be toxic. And we shouldn't just be overly optimistic on everything. And the flip side as well, you shouldn't look at everything and new inventions in crypto as denying everything and denying all of the kind of inventions and innovations in the space. So yeah, a spectrum of kind of emotions there.
It sounds like it's wise to be cautiously cynical.
Cautiously cynical and well-researched is a very good position to be in, definitely. It brings, you need to know that when someone makes money, that means someone is losing money, right? Money don't just get created.
Yeah, well, actually it does, but...
dig to the US Federal Reserve for printing money and causing inflation. But yeah, I mean, when someone loses money, someone else is, taking that off the table, taking that liquidity. And yeah, I think, education. So yeah, I would say that lack of education, the lack of people being held accountable for things is something that can be better in the space. And also kind of criticism of the space, like ideologically, what some of these things represent. There's a lot of people who are kind of anti-crypto for their reasons. There's a lot of people who are pro-crypto, but there's very little understanding of both sides.
They're just shouting at each other.
Yeah, they're just shouting at each other and, not trying to understand each other's perspective and finding a middle ground if that ever exists. But I think there can be, fairer conversations about both sides. And I think, when we first started out with NFT Asia, we had a lot of debates. Like we have this channel called Art Discourse.
Interesting.
And we would just talk about, is this ethical? Like, from different perspectives, how it plays out. We talked a lot about sustainability issues very early on. And that was, one of the first kind of articles where it came out like, oh, one Ethereum transaction equals flying around the earth like 1 million times or whatever. And we were just talking about the feasibility of it, because if you were minting your work on Ethereum, you would be defensive because you don't want to be that person who, is being ultra unsustainable. But on the other end, what are the alternatives? Shipping artwork all over the world by cargo and using a fuck ton of packaging to protect them and foam and installers and trucking them to museums 4 times a year. Like, those are unquantifiable, energy data that we have no access to. And I think there were these, few statistics that came out like, oh, the gold industry uses 4 times as much energy as Bitcoin. Because, all the gold shops that exist to trade gold, all the mining and processing and transfer and heat that is needed to, create gold derivative products. And, even kind of printing paper money or plastic money and the cotton that goes into it, the water that's used, the ATMs on every corner, all the banks. It gets
really abstract after a while.
Like, some banks have 100,000 employees. If the 100,000 employees each have a car to get to the bank to work, like these are unquantifiable data, right? So we should try to understand both sides rather than just use statistics as a way to kind of get around things. We need to understand what are the alternatives. If everything is digital and quick, and I don't know if anyone has tried to like wire money to another country. But I've been dealing with one transaction for the last 3 months and it's still not cleared. and it's because the financial kind of institutions are still using technology from the 70s, right? Swift is like from the 70s and things like that. And I could have done that in 2 seconds with Bitcoin or Ethereum or, USDC or whatever. So there are pros and cons. And I think we should really kind of be able to discern kind of both spectrums of these things.
What has helped you to be able, because what we talked about, I think goes beyond just the crypto and NFT space, because it's just about having productive conversations and productive discussions online across a variety of topics, really. It's about understanding what the other party might be saying, what they mean, and I think voicing your own opinions, and I guess coming to not a full agreement, but just coming to the middle ground and just understanding. What has helped you develop that skill? I will call it a skill because it's not something that people can do easily. Because if you have a vested interest in something, common saying goes is that you will want to protect because you have a vested interest in something.
I would say because technologies are not foundational to your existence, right? You can exist without using the internet. You can exist without using blockchain.
Debatable for the internet.
Debatable,
debatable.
But you can be off grid and you just need access to water, food, and air, right? So people won't die without the blockchain. People won't die without the internet. I mean, things would collapse, but if you have access to water, food, and air, you can survive, right? And I think this is kind of interesting to think about, because if, let's say, there is a collapse of, energy grids, the internet would be wiped out.
Yep.
There will be no more blockchain, but there is also no more, contemporary civilization that we know of.
Yep.
And what we need to understand is that they add value to our lives, but are not inherent to our existence. And we should take our time with building these things out. I think when a lot of kind of, different companies are building products in the space, it's because they usually want to be the first one. Like, I want to be the first Singaporean NFT platform, blah, blah, blah. Because first mover advantage, they want to gather as much market users as possible. And that comes from a position of greed, right? You want the money, you want the users.
Bragging rights, all these intangible things, yeah.
And I think it's healthier to, actually sit down and think about what people actually need and take your time with building that. Because, why rush into something and do something half-ass without actually understanding the implications on both sides of things? And I guess what helped me understand kind of both spectrums and the importance of both spectrum is also listening to criticisms. A lot of kind of pro-crypto, pro-NFT people tend to ignore them. And they don't really challenge them. So when there's criticisms, they're just like, you're flooding the space. Like, just because you didn't get rich on crypto, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's important to have knowledge of what kind of opposing views in the space could be. And then, come to a conclusion with these opposing views rather than just, kind of defend your backs till the end. Because I think we're all just here kind of building a better space for ourselves, and we need to understand that. But because of kind of the competitiveness in the space, we usually turn into enemies. And that's not just, exclusive to crypto. Yep. That's, for a lot of other things as well. So yeah, just trying to be fair to yourself and also to the technology that you're building, I think.
So with your involvement with NFT Asia, I'm curious to know, how has that changed your perception about art and creation? How has it changed over the past year?
I mean, I have to say that the art market or the art scene in Singapore can be quite insular.
What does that mean?
Where people know people and things happen. And if you don't know people, too bad. Then things don't happen. And I think it's not wrong that people kind of, lift up the connections that they know in the space, and they get certain opportunities that are not open to other people coming in, or other people kind of positioned outside of this circle, the inner circle, if you may. And also the lack of kind of transparency with how different projects get funding from, let's say, institutions that, give grants and things to the arts. And the people that are making these decisions know people, right? Like it's not really something that's voted on, it's something that decided. And I think this can be better. And I'm not saying that blockchain can make it better, but I'm saying that blockchain can be alternative to an option, to be an option, to make it better. Sorry, I kind of forgot the other half of that question.
I'm just curious to know, how has the past year and your involvement in NFTs
changed my perception of art. Yeah, so I think coming from that, so my background, like, maybe before I started kind of, my art practice, I came from a decade of freelance photography, working with, fashion portraits, things like that in the commercial scene. And that was quite toxic. To a certain way, right? Like people, you only have so many jobs, and then people want the same jobs. And
so there's a limited supply?
I mean, Singapore's not that big, and clients are not that rich, and sometimes it's like 4 photographers to 1 job or something like that. But I started out really early on when I was like 16, shooting block shops and things like that. I think that was a much easier time compared to what it is now, where everyone has a camera and everyone's kind of undercutting each other and things like that. So like I went from that to kind of, feeling jaded about the commercial freelance photography kind of scene, and moving into art because I wanted to do something for myself. I want opportunities to be able to talk about what I want to say, make work, find opportunities. And I think this started when I was in uni in London. And what I noticed about the art scene in London is people are very supportive of new emerging artists. Like Friday nights, people would go out to shows at independent galleries and spaces, and they just want to check out new artists and what people are talking about. And it's all sorts of art. It's all sorts of explorations, experimentations, and I found that to be really exciting. And I think after moving back, I found that people who get opportunities usually are from very similar groups or networks, and that it's hard to kind of put yourself and situate yourself within this tight-knit community that uplifts each other, right? So like coming from an outsider point of view, it was very hard to kind of be a part of it, or it's very hard to get opportunities to be a part of it while being a part of it. And not that I'm like jaded with the art market or something like that, but it's just that we don't have a lot of opportunities, no matter because it's always dependent on these spaces and land scarcity, space scarcity in Singapore.
You mentioned about funding initially as well. Like certain types of people, certain types of ideas tend to get funded more as opposed to perhaps alternative ideas.
Yeah. So like NAC's 5-year plan is like, audience centric, right? So if your work has bright lights, you basically get a funding. But if you want to talk about something critical, they might think it's too touchy.
Yep.
For example, so I think they were prioritizing kind of giving grants to projects that can engage the public, which is part of their agenda, rather than supporting artists who are kind of creating great work, but may not be, part of their KPIs in that sense.
Or might not fit the brief or something.
Yeah. Yep. So, and it's because there's one agenda. Like, why is there only one agenda? And why should that agenda apply to everything? And yeah, I mean, we can have 15 light festivals a year and still some artists don't get grants. I'm not just talking about like myself personally, but a lot of other artists that I admire still struggle with, trying to get these opportunities to be able to just talk about their works. It's not even about making money, right? It's just, trying to get space. And I think that like being in the NFT space, removing that part of the equation, everybody now has an opportunity to build their own space outside of that ecosystem. Not that this ecosystem will get you the same amount of footfall or kind of eyeballs on your work, but you are able to kind of build something from the ground up, not needing that much resources to do it. So if you think about certain metaverse digital galleries and things like that, you can experiment with all these things, send it to a couple of friends, have 20 people dancing around your artworks. Like this is something tangible that you can do without relying on institutions in that sense. Not that this should replace institutional platforms, museums, galleries, but it's just an alternative for those who are left out of it. And I think that's important to have in the space, because we all know that, you know, not everyone will have or can have this opportunity.
Yep.
So why not just make a little more space on yourself where you don't have to pay rent?
It sounds to me like
rent a space.
like an approval thing as well. You don't need to seek the approval of these art institutions, but you can just do it on yourself.
Yeah, I mean, like the point of having a show is you put something out there and people tell you how they feel, right? But when all of the shows we see are sanctioned by institutions saying that this is of quality, therefore it should be seen. Like sometimes I just want to go out and see a shit art show and like be amazed at some themes that they explore and touchy subjects and you know, some scandalous things that people do with art and experimentations. And I think that is what's interesting to me. And I see that, you know, on a daily basis with NFTs, because there isn't that oversight. You get to see all sorts of kind of creations and all sorts of creativity in this space. And I think that is interesting. You know, bad art should exist as much as good art, and it kind of advises each other. Without bad art, you don't know what is good. And
you can't time when inspiration will strike you as well. You can't time and you can't curate, oh, I only want to find inspiration from good, objectively good works, but the bad art is there so that when you look at it, oh, you might find, oh, this is, maybe I can do something better. And these are the thoughts that if you don't look at bad art, you might not get.
Yeah. It's like watching a shit movie. Yeah. Like it becomes an experience, right? and you're just like, oh my God, this is the worst script ever.
And you might take away something from it.
Yeah. And you learn from it, and you know, it can be entertaining as well, and you know, it just gets you talking about things. And I think that's why it feels sterile overall with kind of shows happening, or maybe it was just COVID, but you know, physical shows happening in Singapore aren't as captivating, and yeah, we should see more experiments with you know, different kinds of explorations. And I think, yeah, that can be better.
Do you see a lot of the younger generation of creatives banding together just to put up like a show in maybe like a warehouse or maybe like just an empty lot, and they do that on their own instead of, let's say, like pitching to an art institution? Do you see that?
I mean, those shows definitely happen, right? Like you as long as you have space, you can make things happen. You can just, you know, print out things, put it on the wall, bring in a small projector and make things happen. And I think that still should exist, and that still exists. You know, these independently led shows, and but it's tough to sustain, I would imagine, you know, because not everyone have access to spaces. And if you're lucky enough to have spaces, then you have to think about the logistics of, you know, putting these things on, and they can be tiring. And, you know, as much as I would want them to, you know, be happening every weekend, I don't think it's also sustainable for people to just kind of, you know, put on these shows on their own dime and making things happen. But, you know, I'm pretty sure they still exist, you know, at different genres, with music, with performance, with, you know, different genres of art. Yeah, I think, you know, that's what's beautiful about the art space, right? Like if you have an idea, you just do it if you're able to. And yeah, that's definitely the kind of energy we need with how we approach different things in the space.
So I'm curious to know, what problems do you see younger creatives facing in the future?
I mean, it's unrealistic to think that you can be an artist full-time in Singapore, because I think the demand and the support that you would require and the marketing you would require to make a full-time living off just making art is quite hard to sustain. I think that probably will be an issue that a lot of artists will face, that I face, that, you know, a lot of my friends who are artists also face. Everyone's working a second job. They all have a side hustle. They all kind of understand that art is for the soul and work is for the living, to live. And I think, having access to, and this is where kind of like I see NFTs coming in, right? Having access to opportunities and tools to commodify parts of yourself, part of your practice can be useful, even, if it doesn't sell. At least it's there. It's like a Shopify site for your works. Someone one day might order a print and you feel great about it. And I think that can happen with NFTs as well. If someone wants to support you as an artist, they like your work, they have the option to buy it. You don't have to, you don't have that much fees that you have to, print and keep stock and mail and things like that. And I think that's definitely one thing that artists will face and can kind of address with certain technologies. Not that they have to use blockchain for that. They can go to art book fairs. You just had the Singapore Art Book Fair recently. Get a booth, put some of your work out there, talk to people, and then someone who likes it will buy your book. And I think, before NFTs, that was what I did. Like I had a couple of self-published books. I would bind them for 3 weeks straight and, bring them to a fair and, like they'll be like, I have 38 copies of my book.
That's all.
That's all I could make in 21 days or whatever. And, I think maybe not so much about the money, but about getting validation as an artist is tough. And it's also important to have. Just people talking about your artwork to you, asking you about your ideas and, your impetus in actually making art. And I think it's the conversations that we crave and we want to talk about in the space.
So I've a two-part question. I'm curious to know, would you call yourself an artist?
I've struggled with this question quite a bit. As a photographer or photographic artist. And I think I saw it, I saw how I kind of worked it out over the years, right? Like if I were to kind of go back to all my bios that I've written over the years, I would say like, Jonathan Liu is a photographer from Singapore. And then slowly it becomes photographic artist in Singapore. And then slowly it's like visual artist in Singapore. And it's kind of like growing your identity in a way where for me, essentially, I stopped leveraging on, seeing myself as just a photographer. I am using photography because I think the medium is fantastic, experimental, it's fun, it's tactile, it's tangible. And what I'm trying to say with my work is the art, right? So I present something visually. I have the ideological kind of approach of an artist, therefore equals visual artist, right? And yeah, I mean, I struggled with that for years. Like, I never used to call myself an artist because like, I'm not a painter. I'm not creating something from nothing, but actually I am. And everyone is. Like you start with a blank artboard on Illustrator and then 10 hours later you have an illustration. Yes, you're an artist. The same for photography. No one else is going to take that picture. You are. And I think it's kind of part of that growth of my identity kind of over the years, being able to call myself an artist. And I think at one point I used to be like, no, I won't call myself an artist until someone calls me an artist, because then that's how they see what I'm doing. So yeah, I think it eventually kind of happened. And
you grew into that.
Yeah, I grew into that role.
So the second part to my question is, do you feel like the definition of what an artist is has changed perhaps within the last decade with the idea of Instagram and the idea of like being your own brand? Being a brand and being an artist seems to be two different things that you have to cultivate at the same time. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's hard for me to answer that question because I'm really shit at marketing myself. I only apply for things that I know I should be able to get. So like open calls, I'll be like, no chance in hell. So I don't waste that $35, you know. And I kind of like, I mean, yeah, it's a tough space to kind of exist in. And oh my God, I forgot the question again.
Like, do you think that the definition of what artist is has changed? Yeah, because right now you don't just need to be able to, let's say, paint well. You need to be able to speak well. You need to be able to brand yourself well. Maybe in front of a camera, in front of people. Well, yeah.
I mean, what is art, right? Like the question that everyone kind of struggles with, and I think, you know, if you are creating something from nothing for no reason, purely because you feel the desire to do it, then you're an artist. And, you know, there are artists in all kinds of crafts and genres, and in music and performance and theater. You suddenly feel the urge to move a certain way as a dancer. You are creating. And I think we shouldn't, you know, I don't think anyone should kind of like gatekeep the term artist, because there can be good artists and bad artists, and you know, people grow from bad artists into good artists. I mean, me for example, and I think, you know, as long as we don't lose that drive to create, I don't think the, you know, the term should be debatable or is even that important. And I think with, you know, the NFT space, you have kind of people taking on that role of an artist much more fervently, you know, throughout the last year and a half. People who used to kind of create 3D models and illustrations and, you know, anime fan art, or, you know, they start to be like, oh yeah, I am an artist, because now there is, you know, this alternative economy for me, and they all are artists, and I am one, and I can be one, and I can mint my work and sell. And, you know, I think the only challenge is people kind of linking success as an artist to selling their work. And I think this is the part that, you know, a lot of people in NFT Asia kind of talk about, right? Like, oh, I feel worthless because I haven't sold my work. I must not be an artist. But, you know, you don't have to sell your work to be a successful artist. And I think a lot of artists or kind of like master painters have died before they ever sold a work. And it was only after that people regard their work as a work of art. And I think we shouldn't kind of link that success as an artist or status as an artist to being able to sell work. And, you know, just about owning that need and desire to make something, to create something, to talk about something, to pull focus to something. You know, we're all artists in this space.
I'm curious to know, why is photography important to you? You have been doing it for over a decade. Why is it important to you?
I mean, photography for me was, I mean, it started out as something I was good at, right? I wasn't very good at school. I wasn't very good at other kind of creative things. I can't draw, I can't paint, but I can see what I think is interesting. I can see narratives in how I can record these photographs. I can think about how I can mess with the photographs to then elevate what it means, right? So for me, it's like, you know, using the camera as a way to express these things that I am unable to express with other mediums. And when I say I cannot draw, right? Like stickman level.
Sure.
And for me, photography gave me a voice that I was searching for very early in my life that I did not have. And I have tried to grow with that voice. I have tried to talk about different things, you know, from my kind of commercial background. You know, I understand what looks good aesthetically. I understand what's good fashion photography, what must look good, what is good lighting, the technicals, right? And then I kind of graduated myself into, you know, talking about ideas and narratives and, you know, how can I talk about an entire story that can be in a book with a photograph? Like, how can I start a train of thought or a process with just a black and white photograph without color? Like, what are these elements that I am using? What are these elements that I'm photographing? What are these elements that I'm adding through experimentation? And I think it's important because it's, you know, for everyone who cannot draw and cannot paint, but you are able to click a button on a camera, point it at the right direction, in the right objects and elements. At the right time, and being able to talk about something is a very accessible way to create art. And everyone has a phone, you know, you can be artists using iPhones. You can, I mean, iPhones have 3D scanners now, LiDAR scanners. You can do 3D things and 3D things. Like, everything is possible if you kind of, you know, just use these tools to give yourself that voice.
The means to create has never been more accessible when you have, let's say, an iPhone.
I mean, even like when I was starting out, when I was like 14 or something, like not everyone could afford, you know, a DSLR, and cameras were like super expensive back then, right? But now it's like, you know, DSLRs are cheaper than iPhones, and you can just pick one up, you know.
You can pick it up
secondhand, shoot photos. I mean, people are like super into film now, but you know, back then film cameras were like $10 and $20 because no one shoots film anymore. But it's coming back, right? So there is this obsession with this craft of, you know, slow approach to creating something or capturing a photo and not seeing them on a film roll. And I mean, I'm a nerd for photography, right? I like large format photography, sheet film, you know, large giant Polaroids the size of iPads and things like that.
God damn, okay.
Right? Like these are things that, you know, they no longer manufacture, and but being able to see a print come to life immediately after you photographed it, it's quite a different experience. And I think I would not be myself or think about the things that I think about without photography. And I think that's why it's important to me, because it gave someone with no talent a means to talk about things and, you know, create narratives and be able to put my perspective out there.
It's fantastic. The follow-up to that is, how does the medium still excite you?
Oh, I mean, I have not been a good artist in the last 2 years because I have not made work in a while. Been busy with, you know, work, NFT Asia and things like that. But the slowness of the process excites me.
Okay. What does that mean?
Like, I mean, compared to what I'm doing right now, you know, work and NFTs and everything goes so fast, right? You don't really have a lot of time to process. You don't have a lot of time to think. But I kind of fantasize about, you know, being with my camera, and especially like the large format camera. And I'm like, you know, that curtain thing that people go under, like when they shoot large format photos, like that moment where you see everything inverted and trying to basically find a photograph, and that slowness of that process, it is hard to find in modern life. And I think that's what excites me. So not about any kind of like new 8K cameras or digital kind of innovations, but it's just the process of photographing something slowly. And I mean, film prices have like, quadrupled since I actually bought film. So that's not something I'm excited about, but the slowness of that process definitely is something that is hard to find in, other mediums. And yeah, I hope to kind of like, go back to that and find more opportunities to have that time and space to, just look into the camera.
I think it's interesting to consider slowness in things, and because it's not something that greater society would value. Things are actually getting faster and more efficient. I think quote unquote efficient, but actually taking time to do one thing. Yeah, I don't think it's valued as much.
Yeah, I think, efficiency and things are important for you to like run your business and, get work done. And, they're like, food always tastes better if you cook it 3 days. Stews.
Okay.
Like beef, ragu, and things like that.
Yep.
Slow cooking versus like, a 2-minute mee goreng.
Or microwave. Yeah.
Microwave. Yeah. It's always very different. I don't know what my point was there, but slowness is important for things to show up, right? Like, bringing it back to art, like if anyone has ever gone through a museum and you've looked at some abstract expressionist artworks and you stand there and you give yourself like 2 seconds or 3 seconds and you're like, this painting is blue, there is a line, this is bullshit, moving on. But if you stopped and you looked into it and you let yourself wander into what it could mean, stand there for 2 minutes and think about things that come to you. Everything that you think about is the result of abstraction, right? When nothing is presented, your mind drifts to, different elements.
Yep.
You're like, or at least I do. I look at a Rothko and I feel his sadness, right? Like I feel the colors that he used. I feel the darkness that he felt. I feel the longer I stare at it, the more emotional I get. And I don't think that's something that is explainable, but it is something that comes with time.
It sounds very human as well.
Yeah. Like the longer you take to process something, the more empathetic you feel. The more you become closer to your emotions. And that definitely doesn't happen a lot, in NFTs or
modern living,
but that slowness can give you a different perspective in how you approach other things in life. And I think it's important to, revel in both kind of technological advancements, but also the need to slow the fuck down sometimes and yeah, just look out into the sky and try to see how small you are. And yeah, that comes with kind of, slow processes and things like that.
My last question for you is, I'm curious to know what motivates you to continue doing what you're doing?
In terms of kind of NFTs or
in general?
Kind of like in general.
Yeah.
I mean, I really enjoy teaching, and kind of being in the arts because, for teaching, I owe my current kind of, life to great teachers, right? Those teachers who were there unequivocally supporting you. And I want to be that for people, especially the arts where it can be so demanding. It can be so
lonely,
and also demoralizing when you lack the validation of, what you're thinking about. No one starts off as like some artistic genius. I mean, not a lot at least. And it takes kind of patience to grow yourself, to learn about new things, to introduce yourself to kind of thoughts and ideas, and that takes time. And I think I enjoy kind of teaching and expanding these explorations with students because I know how important it can be. And especially for arts, right? Like we have the privilege to explore careers in art and careers in creativity. And all we need is people who are patient and empathetic, who can guide you on your path to understanding things. And yeah, that's something that I want to be for people, because people were there for me. And I think for NFTs, a similar vein, trying to create opportunities that I never had as an artist starting out, trying to, not wait for things to happen, but just build opportunities for yourselves. And, with, the family at NFT Asia, who are all quite passionate in their respective fields. I know we're here to kind of do something well with the right intentions. And I think that's something that we and I kind of cherish. And, that no matter how hard it gets, kind of like NFT Asia being a nonprofit, requiring funds or kind of volunteering your time and labor, it feels worth it when you kind of like look at what you have built with, all these wonderful people, and, people have formed friendships and sought work and changed their own lives and found opportunities that was otherwise unavailable to them if not for, what we believe in. And I think that's something that, keeps me in that space, away from the noise of profits or like, 100x your money. Like, sure, that will be a good thing, but that shouldn't be the focus. And I guess as an artist, what keeps me going is that there will always be things that we want to talk about. There will always be things that we are bothered by, that we are, that we desire. And I think, being driven by not knowing what might happen is, quite an exciting position to be in. Like, I have this like tattoo, it's called like Mystery. And it's from this project that I worked on called Mystery is a Compass. And I think, that title points to, allowing this unknown to guide you in the right direction, even though you're not sure where or what it might bring you towards. Just like how I stumbled into things, just like how I stumbled into NFTs, just like how I stumbled into, the things that I create, the people that I meet. I think life is beautiful because you don't know what might happen. And for art, it's the same. You don't know what you might think about tomorrow and want to create tomorrow. You don't know what your desires are, but you just trust it, and you trust yourself to bring yourself to where you should be. And I think that is a powerful thing and a emotional thing to kind of have trust in for yourself. And I think that's what keeps me passionate about this space and kind of doing what I want to do.
That's a beautiful way to end this conversation. Where can people find you online?
You can go to my website, jonathanliu.net. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, going by John Says Relax, and NFT Asia Discord. You can find us on Twitter at NFT Asia Official. And yeah, I'm in LaSalle. Come say hi.
This has been a fantastic conversation, John. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode and feel inspired. If you enjoyed what you heard thus far, do give us a follow on Instagram. And don't forget to share and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next episode.